Westbridge Church. It's great to have you guys joining us today. Over the next few minutes, we're going to sing some songs and we're going to put all the words up on your screen, and we would love to invite you to sing them out with us. Before we do that, we want to let you know that these songs just are great reminders of a God that we serve who loves us and who is for us. So as we learn it together, let's sing it out. Sing out, I give you glory. I give you glory for all you brought me through. And now I'm ready for whatever you want to do. I'm moving forward to follow after you. Every season, the praise has been enough, and I'm believing the best is yet to come. The cross before me, my hope on things above, and in you, Jesus, the best is yet to come. Your presence. Your presence is an open door. We want you, Lord, like never before. Your presence is an open door. So come now, Lord, like never before. Let's put our hands together. And sing out, I know. Yes, I know breakthrough is coming. By faith, now I see a miracle. My God made me a promise and it won't stop now. Whoa. And I know breakthrough is coming. By faith, I've seen a miracle. My God made me a promise and it won't stop now. Sing it again. I know breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God made me a promise and it won't stop now. Whoa. Sing your presence. Your presence is an open door. We want you, Lord, like never before. Your presence is an open door. So come now, Lord, like never before. this morning, you know these words, let's sing it out together. His promises are true. Sing, I know breakthrough. 'Cause I know breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God made me a promise and He won't stop now. Sing it again. I know breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God made me a promise and He won't stop now. Breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God made me a promise and He won't stop now. Sing it one more time. I know breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God made me a promise and He won't stop now. Whoa. Sing this fainted heart. Take these tainted hands. Wash me in your love. Come like grace again. Even when my strength is lost, I'll praise you. Even when I have no song, I'll praise you. Even when it's hard to find your words louder than I'll sing your praise. I will always sing your praise. Take this mountain weight. Take these ocean tears. Hold me through the trial. Come like hope again. Even when the fight seems lost, I'll praise you. Even when it hurts like hell, I'll praise you. Even when it makes no sense to sing louder than I'll sing your praise. And I will always sing your praise. And I will only sing your praise. And I will only sing your praise.
This is about praise that overwhelms circumstance. It's about turning yourself towards Jesus, even when things seem confusing. As unpredictable as the world feels, it's not unpredictable to God. And He says that death is not the end, that isolation and sickness are not the end. We have a good God who came down to meet us and change our story. Keep singing with me. Here we go.
And my heart burns only for you. You are all I want. And my soul waits only for you. And I will sing until the morning has come. But my heart burns only for you. And you are all I want. And my soul waits only for you. And I will sing until the miracle comes. I will only sing your praise. And I will only sing your praise. And I will only sing your praise. Even when the morning comes, I'll praise you. Even when the fight is won, I'll praise you. Even when my time on earth is done, louder than I'll sing your praise. I will only sing your praise. Hold me now in the hands that created the heavens. Find me now where your grace runs as deep as your scars. You pulled me from the clay. You set me on a rock. You called me by your name. Made my heart whole again. Lifted up, and my knees don't fall for your glory. That I might stand with more reasons to sing than to fear. You pulled me from the clay. You set me on a rock. You called me by your name. Made my heart whole again. Here I stand, I surrender. I need you now. Hold my heart now and forever. My soul cries out. Once I was broken, but you loved my whole heart through. Sin has no hold on me, 'cause your grace holds me now. And that grace owns the ground where the grave is, where all my shame remains, left for dead in your way. You crashed those angel gates, you left those stone unturned. You stepped out of that grave and shouldered me all the way.
let us be reminded that we have put our hope and trust in God. And even though he may not have promised we would not go through hardship, he did promise that we would have peace in the midst of it. So join us now. Here I stand, high in surrender. I need you now. Hold my heart now and forever. My soul cries out. Here I stand, high in surrender. I need you now. Hold my heart now and forever. My soul cries out. Here I stand, high in surrender. I need you now. Hold my heart now and forever. My soul cries out.
So here I stand,
High in surrender.
I need you now.
Hold my heart now and forever. My soul cries out.
Once I was broken, but you love my whole heart through. Sin has no hold on me, 'cause your grace holds me now. Healed and forgiven. Look where my chains are now. Death has no hold on me, 'cause your grace holds that ground. Your grace holds me now. Your grace holds me now. Grace holds me now. Grace holds me now. Healed and forgiven. Look where my chains are now. Death has no hold on me, 'cause your grace holds me now. Your grace holds me now. Your grace holds me now.
Well, thank you so much for joining in with us today as we sing about God's great love. Our prayer for you this week would be that you are reminded of his love each and every day. If you are watching from Facebook or YouTube and would like more host interaction, please head on over to live.westbridgechurch.com. There you'll be able to interact with a host. You also can leave a prayer request and that host will pray with you. You can fill out a connection card as well. And if you are tuning in and joining us for the first time, would you click that button, our first guest button? That will allow us to know that you were here today. We can follow up with you this week and answer any questions that you might have. Here at Westbridge Church, we have great kids programming, so we hope you will check that out. You can find that on our platform, or you can head on over to westbridgechurch.com/kidsonline. We never want to miss an opportunity to say thank you for being such a generous church. We could not do what we do here without you. So thank you for that. And here are some ways that you can give. You can give right here on our online platform, or you can head on over to westbridgechurch.com/giving. Or you can also text this number, any dollar amount. It's 763-333-2221. Well, thank you for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of the service.
Hello, Westbridge Church, thank you so much for joining us today. Awesome to have you with our online-only service. And I also want to give a huge shout-out to our friends at the Meeting Place in Spokane, Washington. My name is Jeremiah. I'm one of the pastors here at Westbridge Church. And you guys are joining with us today for our broadcast. And so your pastor, Tony and Ashley, and their family have been huge friends to us. And it's awesome to see what God is doing in Spokane through the Meeting Place, and we're cheering you guys on. So, we are in this season of online-only services, right? This is what we've been doing for a little bit now. And so just to start us off today, we're going to have a little bit of fun. Whether you're on our platform or Facebook or wherever you're watching from, go ahead and I'm going to give you a category, and you type in your response. And I have no idea if this is going to work, so we'll give it a shot. First one's a gimme, okay? It's really easy. Coffee or tea? Coffee or tea? If you're a coffee drinker, type that in, coffee. If you're a tea drinker, tea, okay, coffee or tea. We're gonna find out who the coffee drinkers are, who the tea drinkers are. Okay, that one's a gimme. Next one, a little more difficult. Ready? Xbox or PlayStation? That's right, we're getting personal here. Xbox or PlayStation? All right, type in your responses there. This is an informal survey. We're just gonna see where the Xbox players are versus the PlayStation players. All right, a couple of easy ones to get us started. Now we're gonna ratchet things up a little bit. Here we go. I hope you're ready for this. Marvel or DC? Yeah, Marvel or DC. See, now I know like the comments are gonna start flying. This is gonna get ugly real soon. Marvel or DC? Put on there what you prefer. If you like. Marvel, write Marvel. If you like DC, write DC, okay? Some people like DC, and some people like the better one. Okay, number 4, swim trunks or Speedo? Swim trunks or Speedo, okay? Go ahead and write your answers. We'll see how many answers and responses we get on this one. Okay, we'll give you a couple seconds to write those in. All right, now, 5th one. Final one, and this gets intensely personal, so try to keep your attacks, to a minimum. Vikings or Packers? Vikings or Packers? All right, write it in the comments. It's like I just lit a match and walked away. All right, now, clearly nobody is rooting for the Seahawks. So anyways, we are in the 2nd week of a series that we've simply called Ducks in a Row. Ducks in a row. And we often use that phrase when we're trying to put certain things in order, right? We say, I just got to get my ducks in a row. And the concept behind this phrase, getting my ducks in a row, is that you want to live proactively and not reactively. And so throughout this series, we're tackling different practical areas of our life that we can be proactive in the way that we live and not reactive. And last week we talked about how to be proactive with our time. Now today, we're going to talk about an area of our life that's a really huge area for a lot of people, and that is marriage. Now, let me just say this real quick. If you are single, or if you're single again, don't tune out right now, because I know that's the tendency. All right, this one's not for me. But let me tell you why. First of all, this topic is not intended to diminish those of you who are single in any way. Okay, listen, the Apostle Paul was single. The prophet Jeremiah was single. John the Baptist was single. Jesus was single. Every 3 to 4 days, Taylor Swift is single. Okay, so here's the deal. There is no shame in being single. Second, I want you to know this. Even though we're looking at some principles through the lens of a marriage relationship, the reality is so many of the things that we're going to look at from the scriptures today can actually apply to many of your relationships. And so stick in here with us for this. This is a 1-week refresher on the topic of marriage. Now, when my wife and I got married, we've been married for almost 21 years. When we got married, we took a honeymoon to Hawaii. It was amazing. It was an incredible trip. All we did every day was lay out by the beach, lay out by the pool, go for walks, go swimming, and eat at fun restaurants. Hardly any decisions had to be made while we were on our honeymoon. The biggest decision I had to make was swim trunks or Speedo, right? Obvious answer. And it's amazing how connected you feel in marriage when all you do is go on dates and relax in a tropical climate. It's amazing how connected you feel. And then we got home. And we started to discover a few things about each other, right? A little bit more as we continue to merge our lives together. She discovered some things about me that she didn't find quite as adorable as she once did. And it didn't take too long to discover that we handled conflict really differently. It didn't take too long to discover that we had different ideas of what quality time meant. It didn't take too long to discover that she liked romantic comedies and I liked good movies. And so when we said, I do, we meant it with all of our hearts. But here's what happens. Life happens. Life happens, and over time and through the different seasons of life, you can start to feel disconnected. And yet at the same time, you're trying to build something. Think about the game Jenga. If you've never played the game Jenga before, the goal of the game is that everybody takes turns removing blocks and trying to build the tower as high as you can possibly build it without collapsing. But the problem is every block that you take out actually weakens the foundation. As humans, we only have so much capacity. We can only build our life so high because life is fragile. And so the most important thing we can do is pay attention to the foundation. And what can really muddy the waters is the message that tends to come ringing through in our society when it comes to what to build your life on and build your marriage on. It's really a myth, and here's the myth that comes ringing through. Marriage is about finding the right person. Marriage is all about finding the right person. And so when we're younger, we spend a lot of our time trying to find the right person. Because everything that we've ever learned from fairy tales to movies and music and magazines and reality TV has told us you've got to find the one. That's what we learn from the time that we're a young kid. But I've got 2 words for you that will dispel that myth completely. Ready? Here they are, 2 words. Madison Pruitt. Madison Pruitt. Now, some of you instantly recognize those 2 words. Others of you are like, what does that have to do with anything? Well, let me just fill you in, some of you. In the season finale of The Bachelor, Madison Pruitt left before the final rose ceremony. She was one of the final 2 that The Bachelor had to choose between. And 2 days before the final rose ceremony, she left. Now, I heard all of this. I don't watch the show. I heard all of this from Eli, and he filled me in. So the Bachelor then, on the final ceremony, proposed to someone else. Then here's what happened. Between the time he proposed to the girl, the one girl, and the time that the final rose ceremony came on, he realized, you know what? I don't think I'm actually in love with her. I think she's not the one. Madison was actually the one. And so by the time they get to the final sort of tell-all, reveal-all live show, he's broken up with the one girl. He's asked Madison to come back, and the 2 of them get together. It's an incredible story. And then they broke up 2 days later. I kid you not. Unbelievable. That should dispel any notion that there is just this one. And if you can watch this stuff without a box of Kleenex and chocolates and wine, then you're a better person than Eli. There are some who think that marriage or relationships are the answer to all of life problems. And they think relationships are a quick fix to loneliness or to financial struggles or pressure from your parents. But let me tell you something. Marriage does not solve problems. Despite what some might think, marriage is not nonstop laughter and just watching romantic comedies together and having sex 3 times a day. All right? In fact, the Apostle Paul writes this in 1 Corinthians 7. He says, those who get married will have troubles. Now, I'll be honest with you, you don't read that in Hallmark cards very often, right? That is not the verse that most wedding officiants are quoting at your ceremony. You don't use that verse. But marriage doesn't solve problems, and it also doesn't create problems. On the other end of this spectrum, when people find themselves in a difficult season in their marriage, it's easy to say, well, I didn't have this problem before you were in my life. And what happens is it's very easy to put the blame on the other person. But I wasn't like this until I got married. Well, she made me this way. His personality, her personality, you would be like this too if, and on and on and on. And that's why marriage isn't about finding the right person. Marriage is, here's the truth. Marriage is about becoming the right person. It's about becoming the right person. You are bringing yourself into this marriage relationship. You're bringing all of you, and your spouse is bringing himself or herself into this marriage relationship. And a healthy marriage is not about finding the one, okay? It's about becoming a healthy person so that you can give an emotionally healthy person to your spouse. That's why years ago, a couple thousand years ago, King Solomon actually wrote this, and it doesn't pertain specifically to marriage, but it really applies. He writes this: above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Whatever is in your heart will eventually make its way out into your marriage. That's just the reality. And the temptation for us when we hit a rocky season, when we hit a rocky patches, is we blame our spouse. But the reality is we take the responsibility for becoming emotionally healthy for ourselves, then we can give ourselves fully to our spouse. Because ultimately, marriage is not designed for you to get something from someone else. That is not what marriage is designed for. Marriage is designed for you to give yourself fully to someone else. In fact, I want to encourage you with this. If you're dating right now and you're trying to figure out, is this person someone I can build my life with? Here's the question you really need to ask. Am I giving and giving and giving to them, and are they giving and giving and giving of themselves to me? Because I'm just going to tell you right now, if you give and give and give, and all they do is take and take and take, it is time to run and run and run. Because that is not someone that you'll be able to build your life with. But marriage doesn't solve problems. And marriage doesn't create problems. Marriage only reveals problems. Marriage reveals what's in us. If I'm a negative person, marriage didn't cause that. It was already in my heart. Marriage brought out what was already in my heart. If I have issues with control, marriage didn't cause that. It just revealed what was already in my heart. If I'm fearful and insecure, marriage didn't cause that. It just brought out what was in my heart. Marriage reveals things inside of us that we didn't even know were there. And that's actually a good thing, because if we can acknowledge that and work on it, then we can grow. That's why the author of Hebrews writes this: give honor to marriage and remain faithful to one another in marriage. And so today, over the next few minutes, I want to talk about the foundation of marriage. And looking back, most of the dreams that Cherry and I had when we got married were rooted in our upbringing. Our dreams were filled with assumptions. When we think about getting married, we imagine how our lives are going to be. We sort of envision how they're going to look. And that's not wrong. That's completely natural. I imagine there's certain things that my wife will do because that's what my mom did. And she imagines there's going to be certain things that I'm going to do because that's just the way her dad did it. And we both imagined sort of how our marriage would be scheduled and where we would spend holidays and, all of these sort of desires that we bring with us into marriage. We imagine that maybe we'll live in a certain type of house. We imagine that we'll have, X amount of kids. And for most of us, that's the foundation that we build our relationship on. But today, I want to give you 4 different things, and this isn't an exhaustive list, but these are 4 major things that can actually cause erosion in the foundation of your marriage. And so here they are. The first one is this: when desires become expectations. When desires become expectations. See, every person who's ever been married in the history of the world came into their marriage with certain hopes and dreams. That's completely natural, right? Dreams, desires, and wishes. When Cherry and I got married back in 1999, back in the 1900s, like many of you, we exchanged vows, right? I, Jeremiah, take you, Cherry, to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part, even if that means one of us kills the other one. And it's pretty common for people to write their own vows these days, right? Here's some of them I've heard. The promises get even bigger. It's like, I promise to check in with you every day and listen intently to every word you say. I promise to love you for who you are and not who I want you to be. I promise not to rely on you for my happiness. Those are great promises to make. But we make them to each other because we can be pretty naive sometimes. And even though we say we don't believe in fairy tales, there is something in us deep down that wants to believe that they're true. We have all sorts of hopes and desires and dreams and wishes, but when those hopes and desires and dreams and wishes become expectations, they remove the ability to give and receive love. Because it becomes an obligation. It's impossible to give or receive love in the midst of expectations. That's why the Apostle Paul writes about this. And again, he's not writing specifically about marriage, but he's writing about love and what love looks like. And one of the things that he writes in this chapter in 1 Corinthians that's come to be known as the love chapter, in verse 5, he writes this: love does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. Now, you could say it this way: love doesn't have expectations. Love doesn't have expectations. If Cherry makes dinner, my wife, if she makes dinner, if she takes the kids somewhere, if she handles our finances, she's doing that because she genuinely wants to build a life together with me. But if I view that as an expectation, then it's not really an act of love on her part. And if I work hard and I cut the grass and I fix things around the house and I'm doing, and some of you are laughing right now, you're like, fix things around the house, those of you that know me. But I'm doing that because I genuinely love her. I want to build a life with her. I want to do those things to show her I love her. But if she views that as simply an expectation, then it's not really an act of love. Like, it's not an act of love when I send in my mortgage payment every month. Not an act of love. It's an expectation. Like, my mortgage company has never sent me a note saying, oh, thank you so much for the love. See, it's just an expectation. And the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 13 has some words for those of us who try to put expectations on our relationships. He says, love does not demand its own way. But then he says this at the end of the chapter. He says, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. In other words, it really makes sense to think that way because that's the framework that you grew up with. It makes sense to bring with you a worldview and a framework in a way that you see things based on how things were when you were growing up. That's totally natural. But here's what the Apostle Paul would say: it's okay to reason as a child when you're a child. It's okay to speak as a child when you're a child. It's okay to think like a child when you're a child. But come on, he would say this: it's time to put those childish notions away and grow up. When desires become expectations, it erodes the foundation of your relationship. Here's another one: when busyness becomes apathy. See, think about this. We're all busy. But my busyness has a way of causing me to get apathetic in my relationship. If we're honest, after we've been in a relationship for a while, we lose the motivation to keep working on the relationship. Think about when you get a new car or a car that's new to you. I remember when I first got my incredible Kia Optima. It was new to me, used car, but it was new to me. When you first get this car, right, when it's new to you, it's like, man, okay, don't slam the door too hard, and oh man, gotta make sure I get car washes and gotta keep it clean. No eating in the car, and fast forward, 5-6 years later, it seems like I'm running a restaurant out of that thing. It's just a mess. I gotta clean that thing out. When Cherry and I were dating, I would ring the doorbell, and I swear she'd be waiting right on the other side of the door for me. Just there to open it because she was so excited, the anticipation, counting the seconds till I arrived. And of course, I'd be, wearing cologne and have the mixtape all set and ready to go. And then over time, what happens is busyness starts to creep in. And if you're not careful, busyness becomes apathy. Think about this. Most of the time when we meet the person that we end up marrying, we meet them in a season of life where we have just a little bit of responsibility and a whole lot of time and energy. Life looks differently now. As I look at our life now, almost 21 years later, we have a 17-year-old daughter who's going to be a senior in high school. We have a 13, almost 14-year-old daughter who's going to be a freshman in high school. We have a son who is going to be in 8th grade, and we have a almost first grader terrorizing all of us. There are seasons in marriage, and the temptation is to buy into the notion that if you're in a difficult season now, if you're in a busy season now, it's never going to change. But there's a reason that it's called a season. So think about this. Every winter in Minnesota, we face the exact same situation. Every year, my wife looks at me, lets out a big sigh, and goes, why do we still live here? Every winter, same thing. But even she can't deny that every year, summer keeps coming back around, right? Like a good friend ready to pick up where they left off together. There have been seasons in 21 years of marriage where it felt like winter, where it felt like we couldn't get on the same page, where it felt like we were out of sync, where honestly it felt a little cold and icy. But you have to fight to stay connected through the changing seasons. And here's the challenge. See, healthy marriages don't try to find time for one another. Healthy marriages make time for one another. You got married because ultimately you wanted to spend your life with your best friend. And if you don't work to keep that friendship alive, then what ends up happening is you become business partners running a free bed and breakfast. Okay, that is not what you want. When you establish some connecting points, when you establish some a rhythm or a pattern, or you don't allow apathy to creep in, you prioritize together time, then you don't have to spend all your extra time together dealing with the business side of marriage, and you can actually have some fun together. I love what it says in Proverbs. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit saps a person's strength. How's the humor in your marriage? Can you remember the last time that you laughed out loud at something together? Can you remember the last time that you had fun together, that you joked around together? And do you laugh together on a regular basis? If not, maybe you need to be intentional about planning some fun and some quality time together into your marriage. Don't let busyness evolve into apathy. Again, in Proverbs, it says, a glad heart makes a happy face. For the happy heart, life is a continual feast. One great ritual is to always kiss your spouse every time that you come home and every time that you leave. It builds anticipation for each other's arrival, and it helps you stay connected. Song of Solomon 1 says, kiss me and kiss me again, for your love is sweeter than wine. Don't stop doing these little things that help you connect, because when busyness becomes apathy, it will erode the foundation of your marriage. Here's another one that erodes the foundation. Number 3, when tensions become problems. When tensions become problems. Every relationship has problems and tensions. That's just the reality, whether it's marriage relationships, whether it's parent-child relationships, whether it's coworker relationships or friendships, every relationship has problems and tensions. The challenge is understanding what's a problem and what's a tension. And the reason that's so important is because problems need to be solved, but tensions simply need to be managed. Most of the time, we get this backwards. And it's the reason why we have so much frustration and sometimes disillusionment in our relationships. We try to solve tensions and manage problems. Marriage expert Dr. John Gottman says, this is a quote from him, 70% of the conflicts in our relationship are perpetual because they are hardwired into who we are as people. Think about that. That's good news, right? 70% of your conflicts are never going away. Great news. I'm glad I tuned in today. But that's because they are simply tensions based on your gender differences, based on your personality differences. When you got married, you were welcoming into your life a whole new set of tensions. That's because, one of you is a morning person and one of you is a night owl. It's because one of you loves to spend and the other one loves to save. One of you is an introvert. One of you is an extrovert, right? One of you is a neat freak and the other one, not so much. There's just differences. And rather than constantly fighting over tensions that will never go away, they're just part of our personality, we need to grow in understanding our partner's point of view. In Proverbs 13, it says, joyful is the one who finds wisdom, the one who gains understanding. Understanding and wisdom are two powerful words in communication. See, when was the last time that you really tried to understand their point of view? Whether it's a marriage relationship or a friendship or a coworker, when was the last time that you actually sought to understand the other person's point of view. Because when you accuse or you make assumptions or you jump to conclusions, it doesn't solve anything. Great marriages, great relationships are built by people who seek to understand where the other person is coming from. And they gain wisdom about how to move forward through understanding. Once you understand why your husband acts that way, why your wife thinks that way, it will change how you feel about them. Even though nothing has really changed but your understanding, the tensions go way down when the understanding goes up. In Ephesians chapter 4, the Apostle Paul writes this: always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Notice Paul doesn't say, hey, try to find someone without any faults, because then marriage will be easy. Hey, try to work with people without any faults. Try to make sure that you are friends with people without any faults, because then relationships are a lot easier. He says, no, here's what we do. We do the same thing that Jesus did for us. We do the same thing that God did for us through Jesus, that we are humble and gentle and patient. And what we do is we actually make allowance for each other's faults, because that's what love does. When we make allowance for each other, we give each other the freedom and the space to continue to become everything that God has created us to be. And after all, that's what God does with us. Now, let me say this when it comes to tensions and problems. If you have a real problem, sometimes it's not a tension. It's not something that just needs to be managed. Sometimes you have a problem. And if there's a real problem in your marriage, don't try to manage that. Deal with it. Deal with real problems. Ongoing addiction, abandonment, abuse, those are problems that you don't just manage. Those are things that need to be dealt with. Problems need to be solved. Tensions need to be managed. And understanding and wisdom will help you know the difference. Now, here's the fourth thing that can erode your marriage relationship and the foundation of your marriage. When love becomes driven by emotion. When love becomes driven by emotion. Every romantic movie you have ever watched is about attraction and emotion and chemistry and how someone feels leading up to that sort of in love moment with another person. And it's easy to think from all of that our relationship should really look a lot like a Disney movie. But there's a reason that romantic comedies only last like 90 minutes, because once they get together at the end of the movie, then real life begins, and they can't show you that part, right? See, when we talk about being in love in our culture, we talk about feelings. We talk about emotions. We love the chemistry that comes in those early stages of that romantic relationship. And that's natural. And then we get married. And you know what happens? Our relationship starts hitting tensions. And I know that because I'm married. We have tensions. And when your relationship starts hitting tensions, guess what is the first thing to go? Chemistry, emotion, feelings of in love. And we start to think, well, man, maybe I didn't get the one. Maybe I missed it. Maybe they weren't the one. Maybe we just fell out of love. We just aren't in love anymore. Well, let me tell you something. You can fall into emotion. You can fall into infatuation, but you cannot fall in love. And when the emotions or the feelings fade, that's the language that our culture tends to use. Well, we've fallen out of love, but the reality is you have not fallen out of love because you never fell in love. You've simply chosen to stop doing the things that build love, because love is always a choice. Love is about doing for someone else, not trying to get for myself. Probably no better example for this than Jesus. And here's what Jesus said to his disciples right before he was put to death and he rose again. In John 13, he's with his disciples. He says, "So now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other." Jesus says, okay, look, moving forward, here's the standard for love. This is what love is going to look like from now on. From moving forward, I'm going to be the example of love. Now, I don't want you to love the way your parents loved. I don't want you to love the way that you've seen other people love. I don't want you to love the way you've seen it on romantic comedies, the way that you've seen it on reality TV, okay? I want you to love each other in the same way, to the same degree that I have loved you. And then, within a week of Jesus saying that, Jesus would lay down his life. Just before he laid down his life, Jesus said, there's no greater love than this. And this verse started to take context for Jesus' followers. After he was put to death and rose again, they realized that is the kind of love that we should have for one another. That we should love the way that Jesus showed love to us. Now, here's what's important. Jesus is not asking you to die for your spouse. He is asking us to die to ourselves and to put them first. And when you do that, and when your spouse does that, when both of you are doing that for each other, it is the most powerful relational dynamic in the world. But it's not based on emotion. It's a choice. See, you don't feel your way into love. You choose to behave in loving ways, and the feelings and the emotions follow. So, 4 things that will erode the foundation of your marriage if you're not careful. Number 1, when desires become expectations. It's okay to have desires, but if it's an expectation, it's really difficult to show love. Number 2, when busyness becomes apathy. We're all busy, but don't allow it to dissolve into apathy. Number 3, when tensions become problems. It's not a problem. Sometimes it's just a personality difference, and you just got to manage that tension. And then number 4, when love becomes driven by emotion. Instead, choose to do loving things, and the emotions will follow. When it comes to marriage, man, let's get our ducks in a row. Let's work on becoming the kind of person that we would want to be married to. And let's love the way that Jesus has loved us. Jesus loved us so much that he was willing to lay down his life for us. And that means death is not the end, and you have been invited to be a part of God's family. If you're watching and you're checking us out on our platform or on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're at, if you'd like to say yes to the invitation to be a part of God's family, would you just agree right where you're at with this simple prayer? Jesus, please forgive my sins. Forgive me for the times where I've walked away from you. And I thank you that you've never walked away from me. And I pray, adopt me into your family. Make me your son. Make me your daughter. And help me to follow your way of living life as best as I know how. Help me to trust you, to surrender my life to your way of living. In Jesus' name, amen. Man, if you prayed that prayer with us and you said, man, I want to start following Jesus, would you just please click that button on our platform? Just let us know. That just lets us know that you've prayed with us, and I want to personally follow up and just answer any questions that you might have. And man, for the rest of us, my prayer for you is that whether you are in a marriage relationship, co-workers, parent-child relationship, friendships, that you can take some of these principles and apply them to your life. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a great week.